Hey there, thanks for tuning in to The View from Monkey's Eyebrow. We are broadcasting out of Joe's Place in Monkey's Eyebrow, located in Ballard County, Kentucky. We'll be talking with the folks who live in Ballard County. They are some of the most fascinating characters, and will share some of the most interesting stories you'll ever hear. By the time they're done, you might even want to live here. Your host is Joe Culver. Hey, this is Jesse Culver sitting here with my father, Joe Culver, doing an interview. How you doing, Joe?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
I know you're excited to tell people about your new podcast, The View from Monkey's Eyebrow, and what got you interested in doing this?
Well, you know, I've worked away from Ballard County for a lot of years, and then I moved back to Monkey's Eyebrow in 2010. I've always loved the people in Ballard County and the stories. Now, I grew up listening to stories. I'd sit around Bill Ryan's filling station in Wycliffe and listen to the storytelling going on there. But there's two types of stories. There's the stories they tell that sometimes have a grain of truth, and then there's the life stories that are true. And Ballard County is populated with people who have both kinds of stories. But as I looked around and you notice the news media, no one is getting those stories out and sharing them with people, either people in the county or people outside the county. And I thought a podcast would be a great opportunity to bring in different people from Ballard County and talk to them about their own stories and maybe some of the stories they tell. And so that's why I've started it.
All right. I know just from being your son that in the past you've had jobs with public relations. I remember one time you had a little show on television there in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. You want to talk about some of your job history?
Sure. I know I haven't had a normal career path. I started out, my first job was guiding tours and working in the office at what was then known as the Ancient Buried City, now known as the Wycliffe Mounds. I worked for George Johnson, and I did that when I was a junior and senior in high school. My first job after that, actually, I had gone to the University of Kentucky for a semester, and I came home for the summer, and I saw an ad in the Carroll newspaper where someone was looking for people who could write and had a sports background. So I applied for it, and it turned out that was a sports writing job at the Carroll Evening Citizen, and I was hired. And I liked that job so much, I didn't go back to the University of Kentucky. I worked for the Carroll newspaper 4 different times, and sports writer, sports editor, managing editor at one point. I was a columnist and also did a lot of photography. I've served in both the Army and the Navy. I served in the Army in the Canal Zone and in the Navy at Guantanamo Bay. I worked at the Paducah Sun Democrat. At that time it was a Democrat. That's before they decided to drop that word. And the Oak Ridge newspaper in Tennessee. I worked at Oak Ridge National Laboratory in public affairs and became the director of public affairs. I practiced law. I did medical malpractice law in Oak Ridge, Tennessee for a while, but then I was hired to be director of public affairs at the National Energy Technology Laboratory in Morgantown, West Virginia, with other sites in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And that's where I retired. I retired as a federal employee from the National Energy Technology Lab, and that's when I moved back to Monkey's Eyebrow.
Didn't you also write a book?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, because that gives me a chance to put in a plug for it. I have a book out called Characters by the Bushel, My Love Affair with Monkey's Eyebrow. And it has some of those stories I talked about that I've heard people tell while I was sitting around the filling station and other places that I've done. Now, it's available over Amazon.com. Hint, hint, all you folks out there that would love to read some really good stories. and haven't read my book yet.
Characters by the Bushel, Joe Culver. I think some people would probably describe you as a character yourself. I know you have a love of suspenders and ties of unusual design, and you have a habit of naming your children and pets rather unusual names. You want to talk about that?
Well, I guess I've never thought about them being unusual. I had a little kind of a Chihuahua kind of a dog that I named Kitty Cat. I had a couple of Chesapeake Bay Retrievers named Puke and Dammit. I had a parakeet named Buzzard. One of my Dobermans was named Dracula. And my children all have names that start with the letter J, but that goes back to my parents and my siblings and my grandfather, John Culver, my parents, Joe Culver and Jesse Culver, me, Joe, my sister, Jeannie, brother Jerry and Jeff, other sisters, Julie and Janie, and then my children, starting with Jennifer, Joe Ray, Jody, Jade, and then comes the three last children that you're one of, that all had middle names for ducks: Jesse Mallard, Jubal Drake, and Jolie Teal. I don't see anything unusual about any of those.
Me either. I've always thought Jesse Mallard had a nice ring to it, but other people tend to be amused or confused when they hear names. I'll tell people that I'm Jesse, my mom is Jesse, my grandfather is Jesse, and my grandmother was Jesse.
Yeah, that seems normal to me.
Plus my brother, my dad, and my grandpa are Joe. Okay, is there anything else you want to tell people before we wrap this up?
Just that I am really excited about this podcast, and I want as many people as possible to listen to it, not because I'm going to say anything worth hearing, but because the guests will. The first guest will be Todd Cooper, and I hope to post that podcast show on Friday, November 18. Everybody be sure and listen for it. Thank you.
And that's today's view as seen from Joe's Place in Monkey's Eyebrow. Please visit us again next time.